present, so we'll dispense with roll call. And we stand and we'll say the pledge today. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
I'm sure you need a second.
Yeah.
Agenda is approved. Is there any public comment today? Hearing from no one and not having any of the orange sheets, we'll move on to our first agenda item to discuss. Once again, the policy committee's role is to make recommendations to the Board of Education. There are no votes taken here, it's just discussion and kind of review of policies before it goes to the entire board. So we've got a couple of categories of policies to tackle today, and the first one, the first category is 5-year reviews. And through our subscription service with Press, on just an ongoing rotating basis, they bring back policies that need to be reviewed every 5 years. There's no, unless we wanted to take action with them, it's just putting the policy in front of us, saying here it is, and then we can still do it with the policy. So I'll just go through those 5-year reviews, happy to answer any questions, that type of thing. So the first one is policy 2:40, board member qualifications. The second 5-year review is board policy 2:50, board member term of office. 2:60, board member removal from office. Policy 4:30, revenue and investments. Board policy 2:240, board policy development. And just to clarify, with that policy, there is a recommendation from Mr. Keefe to change that policy. So just want to, the 2 separate items of business, we're just doing a 5-year review, and then his proposal is still on the table for our next board meeting. 3:60, administrative responsibility of the building principal. 4:90, activity funds. 6:65, student social and emotional development. 7:185, teen dating violence prohibited. 8:95, parent involvement. 5:40, communicable and chronic infectious disease. 5:130, responsibilities concerning internal information. 5:310, compensatory time off. 6:110, programs for students at risk of academic failure and or dropping out of school and graduation incentives program. And the last 5-year review is 7:170, vandalism. Good with those?
Just a point of clarification. So we just take what Press has given us and then publish that as our part of our school policies.
Not 100% of the time. We do have the latitude if there would be something that we want to localize, that's fine.
Okay.
I would say that happens often these days, just because Press reflects the state statute.
Right.
So we get Press updates
Right.
after the legislature does their thing, and it trickles down into board policy.
Right. I guess like the last time we met, it had to do with going through gang territory.
Right.
So that comes legally through, but it's not really luckily for our district, I don't think it's something that we have to necessarily struggle with. So we'll implement it, but there are some other parts of this that we would maybe wanna take a look at tailoring in instances, right?
At the role of the policy committee, we can do that.
Okay, I just still getting my sea legs here, I'm trying to understand.
And again, and sometimes when we met previously, this is only my second time on this committee, but there were things that would come forward and we were like, well, we're not ready to adopt that yet, is that okay? And it was okay, and so. And then previously what we did was we'd bring it to the board and we would say, this is what we recommend, what do you think? So just to give you a little history.
Okay.
So what we do then in our portal with Press Plus is then we go in and say, yep, we reviewed the 5-year and check them off. But that does not preclude going back and altering the policy. That option is there.
Okay.
Can I ask like a tort question, but like, so as we have our insurance providers look at things like that, do they look at our updates on these things and figure out, that we're reducing our liability because we're doing things, or is that a?
Specific
So you're
to,
Mr. Knox
I don't know, just, sometimes if we're really proactive on stuff and it puts us out in front of making our district more financially secure and things like that. Is that
absolutely,
something-
yeah, I mean, back when we had all the security cameras and outdoor security, I mean, absolutely, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Either way, I let them know, and they can.
All right.
Okay. So then, moving on to the updates that came with the Press 101 update. Before I go into those, I will just broadly speak and say there's not a lot of like really huge substantive change
Just
here.
language changes.
Yeah, but just to gear everybody up for Press 102, it apparently is significant, and because there's a lot of, the Press 102 update is gonna reflect the spring legislative session. So there's gonna be a lot of things coming forward that impact the workplace, as an example, like recreational marijuana legalization, so that impacts us, that's just one example. So, just getting everybody prepared for Press 102, because they don't all come like this, where they're just kind of like language changes, that type of thing. But our legislators were really busy this spring, and so that'll be reflected then in the next
And
update.
that's due out.
What did Angie tell us, like November, maybe even early December? It's gonna take a while to revise and update all of the policies, so late fall.
Okay, and then can you send those to us as soon as we get it? Because if it's a lot of reading,
Yes,
I'd like to get it, jump
absolutely,
on.
yeah.
Because it seems like you indicated that we kind of meet, this policy committee meets every 6 months or so, or do
Well,
we,
yes,
we'll
needed.
move it up?
Yeah,
Without-
absolutely.
So there's some substantial reading going on, I'd like
Yeah.
to get a.
There's been a lot going on, considering we met twice already, so.
Yes, and so with 101, we do have, so we also have a time limit within our Press Plus subscription in which to get these changes through to the board and then uploaded. So they can't just hang out there forever, so we wanna get on them, and as soon as we get that, we'll get it out so that you can review it. This summer was important to get Dawn trained and on Press Plus and the portal and that kind of thing, so this thankfully was kind of a minor, I don't wanna say minor, they're all important, but less substantive update. So I'll just go through these, please stop me with concerns, questions. First update is board policy 2:110, qualification terms and duties of board officers. There's just a minor change in item number 1 and 2 under president and then under secretary. And then some cross references and at the back of the policy reference.
And so this is just updating cross references, or is this an indication that those policies have also been updated?
It's just updating,
So like this says the committees, so are they just adding, or is that?
it's
you
just
know,
saying that these other
You
policies
should
are
also
related.
refer to the
Yes.
committee's policy, but not necessarily that the committee's
We don't have
policy
change-
has made any changes.
We don't have any changes to those particular policies. The next one is 2:140, communications to and from the board. So in that first paragraph, guardians is answered. In the next section there, that is expanded to say the superintendent or designee shall, during the board's regular meetings, report for the board's consideration all questions or communications submitted through the active electronic link along with the status of the district's response. So that would be something that I envision like putting in my superintendent's report, if that's amenable. Seems like a logical place to put that. And then coming down to, under use of electronic communications in accordance with the Open Meetings Act and oath of office taken by board members, individual board members will not A, reply to an email on behalf of the entire board, or B, engage in the discussion of district business through electronic communications with a majority of a board quorum. And then this is the exhibit that goes along. It just further exhibits always kind of expand on and further delineate the board policy. And from what I can see, the only change is it just references the Open Meetings Act in that first line, and at the very end, it defines litigation hold. The change in policy 420 fund balances adds language, the school district seeks to maintain a year-end fund balance revenue ratio of no less than 15 to 20% as calculated under the Illinois State Board of Education School District Financial Profile. Ran this by Trent, that completely doable, and it is a guideline. The state, from my experience, and Trent, you can speak to this, but they've never established a guide or a law or anything about what you must keep as fund balance, and that's just because school districts vary so much. It's also probably because the state's been responsible for not properly funding.
Money come out without.
It'd kind of be weird for them to impose something like that.
Then they'd have to live up to it.
Yeah, how about that? Okay, moving on to policy 2:230, public participation at school board meetings and petitions to the board. So the changes here: for an overall minimum of 30 minutes during each regular and special open meeting, any person may comment to or ask questions of the board, subject to the reasonable constraints established and recorded in this policy's guidelines below. During public participation, there will be a 20-minute minimum total length of time for any one subject. When public participation takes less time than these minimums, it shall end. Now, that seems like common sense, that last sentence, but
Right.
I guess they're just making sure. To preserve sufficient time for the board to conduct its business, any person appearing before the board is expected to follow these guidelines. I'm not going to read all those guidelines, but the new ones, observe when necessary and appropriate the shortening of the time for each person to address the board during public participation to conserve time and give the maximum number of people an opportunity to speak. B, expansion of the overall minimum of 30 minutes for public participation and or the 20-minute minimum total length of time for any one subject. And or C, determination of procedural matters regarding public participation not otherwise covered in board policy. And then conduct oneself with respect and civility toward others, and otherwise abide by board policy 830, which is visitors to and conduct on the school property. So this expands how much time can be spent on any one topic, and expands, sometimes there will be a group of people that want to speak on one topic, and so a chunk of time can be set aside to do that. I don't know that it really might change what we do a little bit.
Yeah, I guess my thought when I was reading this is that it seems to me it might be a good idea to relook at our agenda, because if we're going to, make sure that we have 30 minutes of time for people to speak, we really only have one section of the current agenda that allows for public comment, and if somebody's running late or they can't make it, or they want to comment on a different section of the agenda, maybe we need to look at putting another public comment section in at the end before adjournment. We need to look at allowing participation, within a certain subject, because it looks like we can allow 20 minutes of time for any one subject. So I think we need to take a look at how our board meeting agenda is really structured and make sure that we, afford people the opportunity to talk. Not that they, I haven't been in a meeting yet where we had 30 minutes of discussion, but I think it's certainly possible that we could, and to just make sure that we haven't set an agenda that would restrict that. So I think it's probably a good idea to look at the agenda, and from an overall just 50,000 foot level, you've got your traditional agenda items, new business, old business. There might be some opportunities there to also add spaces for public comment.
There are places that do it at the end as well.
Right.
So
I like it either at the beginning or in, but not in the middle, just because I think that.
I guess what I'm wondering here though is that for any, minimum length of time for any one subject, seems to me like that could mean, if we have 7 subjects for discussion, then you have 20 minutes per 7 subjects. So how do we facilitate a meeting that would allow for conversation that makes sense within the agenda that we've structured? So does that mean that we allow for comment under each subject that appears on the agenda, and then a space for open comment on both ends of the agenda? Because you also have the ability to come and comment on something that's not on the agenda.
we've allowed that.
Right, well, I mean, state law, I mean, it's pretty clear that you can come in and make a public comment on anything, whether it's on the agenda or not, but then this seems to also indicate that within the agenda, subject matter is available. So how do we go through that process of looking at that agenda? Is that something that this committee would do and make a recommendation?
This is just my initial thought, hearing your ideas about how best to go about that. We have the first reading of these policies at the board meeting next Monday, and so no action will be taken here, but if this topic could be raised.
I'm happy to bring that back up, because I do think it warrants discussion with the whole board.
Then I would look to the whole board to provide direction either to you guys, or it is possible to, not that I think we need another committee, but you can form another temporary committee to take up the topic and look at it. But it seems like because it's coming out of policy, it might make sense to meet and discuss that. But let's talk about it Monday night.
Okay, can we add that as an agenda item, or where do you want it?
Here's what I would suggest is, since this is gonna be a discussion.
Just wrap it into the policy discussion?
Okay.
Okay.
I would say.
Which leads me to the other thought that I had, which I'll just say now because it spurred my memory again. When we organize and vote for all of these policies, we usually do it as a group. And so when we have something specific to a certain policy that we want to make a comment on, or if I were to object to, I can't even think of the marijuana one, which I won't, but I'm just trying to think of a policy. If I had an objection to one of the policies and they're all grouped together, then I have to object to all of the policies being passed. So could we think about also treating this more like a consent agenda, where we list the policies out and we keep them as a block, and then if someone has something they'd like to kind of take off for individual discussion, then that allows people to have that discussion without having to say a yes or a no for the entire block of policies. I imagine that we will have policies come up that warrant more discussion, and people probably don't want to have to vote no on every single policy.
That's a good suggestion.
In order to do that.
So do you think, how would it look different on our agenda, do you think?
I don't know if it would look different, but maybe we treat it, just say the policy agenda is all of these policies listed. Does anybody have a policy they would like to pull out for additional discussion and vote on separately after initial discussion? Because things that are, just language changes, I guess that someone could want to talk about that, but I can't think of any objection to language, but for content, and then the purpose of actually saying, how do we take this policy now and turn it into process? That, I can see that coming up quite a few times, and I think that's probably the easiest way to facilitate that discussion with the board without having to negate an entire block of policies.
Agreed.
Okay.
I started laughing when we were talking about this. Did you hear the feet of walking above us? Remember the last meeting where we had all the little critters?
Do we know what kind of raccoon family is living up there?
At the last meeting, there were like something going up and along around here. And we were like,
I'm suspecting someone's living up there, but maybe
that
it's
was
just,
person. That was
maybe it's just cogs and wheels,
I
but
think I was laughing at what you said. I was like, oh my gosh.
hopefully it's just mechanisms and not a raccoon family.
Those were big feet.
Okay, let's see, 5:180 is temporary illness or temporary incapacity. There's actually more taken out of this, policy, but the emphasis is on, licensure and being registered. I don't think it's a major change, just clarification there.
It seems to expand the ability to have someone give you a temporary illness or incapacity diagnosis, so that seems good.
Policy 6:40 curriculum development, there's just a legal reference change. In policy 6:340, we're just updating it to reflect the new name for the state assessment, Illinois Assessment of Readiness, and taking out park. And those are the updates from Crest Online.
Just when you learn the one, you change it.
So we'll bring those, forward, all of them forward to the board as is, and then we'll discuss.
Yeah, I think so.
each
I mean,
All right, then we are moving into, Dr. Rummel has several updates. So this meeting is a good example of us revising press policies to reflect our practices.
okay.
So, Dr. Rummel.
Yeah, so, I guess we'll start with, 6210. Is that one that's on there? And so currently, the only information, that was included regarding instructional materials was, related to, R-rated movies and in C-17. And just some questions that had come up from staff this past year, thought it would be a good idea to have a little bit more guidance for staff on movies or sections of movies that would be shown. And so as you can see, anything over a G rating at the elementary level needs to run through the principal with parent notification. And then at the junior high, it would be a PG-13, would need to require principal approval and parent notification. And then at the high school, an R-rated movie would require principal and superintendent approval and parent notification. So the big piece there is just kind of setting some guidelines for staff in terms of what level of movies can be shown at what level, and then notifying parents. So, and then that way, if the parent has a concern, they're able to share that concern with the classroom teacher.
So I guess my question is, are these movies that are part of the curriculum? Are these movies that are like fun day movies? Like, what's the scope of the movies? I'm wondering if it's part of the curriculum, it seems like those movies might be set forth at the beginning of the school year, and we could actually give parents a list and ask for their specific permission with, this is the list of movies that your children will be seeing. You know, just being a parent of a junior high, two junior high students, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm having a moment. All PG-13 movies are not created the same.
Absolutely.
And so, I guess my other process-related question to this is there a way that we can ask for a time frame for parent notification? You know, the night before, if somebody misses an email, that might not be enough time. So from a process standpoint, if we're gonna ask for, I'd really like to see if we can ask for specific permission with each of the titles. So that's my question is this curriculum based, because that seems easier to do to me, because that seems like an outset, but if it's also supposed to cover, fun movies, you know, is there a way to set up a library of movies that are approved that you present to parents at the beginning of the year and say, these are the PG-13 movies in our library, this is what you can expect, and then I would be more inclined to say the notification is okay with a time frame that gives a parent, you know, the ability to, I don't know, 48 hours, something like that. Just in order to make sure that if people, because, you know, movies are something that parents have a wide range of feeling on.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm just trying to make sure that we give people enough of a breadth of time to be able to, and then how do we not have to do that all the time? So the library idea or the curriculum idea was what I had, which is how can we get this up front at the beginning of the year so there are no surprises. So, I don't know if those are just questions I'll ask here, or, Dr. Rummel, if you have, you know, input on that, or if I'm asking too many questions.
No, they're great
I
questions.
think they're great questions. I don't know, I think that there definitely would be some that could be listed at the start of the year that they may know about, that they use ongoing, especially maybe as part of a history course or science course. That they, especially if they're just using pieces of it. I would say sometimes maybe as part of like an incentive, they might show something whole grade or a whole class, and that might change and might not be identified right at the start of the year. And so I think some sort of time frame for notification is very fair on that. I think most teachers would probably send it, my guess would be the week before and kind of their weekly.
I'd just like to put some guidelines around that, just so parents know what to expect.
So I think for the purpose of the policy, like this level of language is where we need to be for policy, but what you're talking about, I think then is most appropriate to go into the administrative procedure that will be linked to this, which then would have not only a time frame or the suggestion of, if you know what it's going to be at the beginning of the year, kind of much like here are the novels we expect to read, that type of thing. Although we all know that sometimes there's changes or adjustments just depending on the kids who are sitting in front of you. But then that also, the time frame could be written into that as well. I know I already said that, but what I was headed to was then an actual a form letter kind of just common thing that we can use to communicate this.
Or on the website, I mean, if we have a place for forms and calendars, it seems like it would be an appropriate place to say 6th grade, these are the movies, 7th grade, these are the movies, 8th grade, these are the movies. And then, I guess, some sort of mechanism for informing parents how we would like them to notify the teacher if they have an objection to that. I just like to set expectations and process, because I think it makes the lives of teachers a little bit easier. I think it makes the lives of parents easier when everybody kind of understands what to expect. So I'm fine with it not being here, but I would like to continue to follow this thread through to make sure that, you know, that process piece of it
Absolutely.
is done where appropriate.
Agreed.
Okay.
Alright, grading and promotion.
And so parent notification is required for R-rated movies. You really can't show an R-rated movie to somebody who's under 17 legally without actual permission. You know, you can't get into a movie theater without an adult. So are we comfortable with this? Or I'd almost like to see the language change on this, rather than notification, to say permission. And
So we can
I
do
mean, I don't
that.
wanna throw a big monkey wrench in here, but in terms of legally, like, you can't get into the movie theater without an actual adult giving you permission. So it seems like if we could follow that thread through here for consistency, it might be helpful.
So Yes, we can do that. If you look, the part that's, was stricken, that's the old press, what press recommended before. And so really we just kept that part and expanded, with the parent notification piece that was not currently in there. But, we can
I guess
definitely
if
change that
it's
from
part,
a
if, as long as we have
Say
the,
permission.
I just like permission just for that R
I
rated.
think what it might look like though is more of a, for, if it's high school, and honestly, I cannot see showing an R-rated movie in the junior high. I don't know what that would be, so, let's just
Well, and
assume that it's
so it's
gonna
how you
probably.
take it, interpret it different, cause like I just have 2 high schoolers, and I was like, okay, I feel like the syllabus has said what they've read, and I've been notified, and I've been given these guidelines, so I feel like this is just to cover ourselves even further, because.
I think the permission might look more from a passive standpoint, meaning if you object to your child seeing this, here's how you let the teacher know.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Again, if
As
it's
opposed
just a
to gathering
mechanism
information
for
source.
making sure that the parent has been made aware and has had the appropriate opportunity to opt out.
Sure.
It's been a while since I've had a 5th grader, but I remember when you get the 5th grade consent, we'll be showing this movie, if you object, you can show it, you can choose to show it
Just
yourself.
to be clear, that's not an R-rated movie, what you're talking
No,
about.
I know, but my point is that these are things though, and even in health, my daughter had health last year, she sends the same email out, we're gonna be talking about some uncomfortable situations, this is what they are, could please let me know in advance if you object to this, or if you don't want them to be in the room.
Right, I just know that when you go to policy, that's kind of where we set expectations, so I'm fine with however we need to solve that.
Like I said, the R-rated movie, yeah, we have a very small population of kids that should be able to see that, 17 is, my son was a junior in 17, so.
Alright,
Thanks.
so, thank you. The other one is, just trying to pull it up, is, 6-3-10 credit.
We do 6-2-80.
6-2-80.
I know it's just language, but.
6-2-80 grading and promotion.
Can you, I don't.
Oh,
have that right in
we're
front.
just changing part to IAR.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Yes. Sorry. So do you have 6-3-10 then?
Yep.
That's the next one? Okay. So this summer I met with, high school department chair for guidance and a couple of teachers and Chad Benedict, the high school principal. And we just had a discussion that we had, in regards to this policy that our, practice, we wanted to align the policy with our practice. And so the first one, you see, we don't really have correspondence courses anymore, it's just a little dated, so we updated that to online courses. And one of the things that we wanted to change, was the exception for credit recovery. We really want our kids graduating from high school on time. And so we do have some students that may fail a course and go to Champaign and take that in the summer where it's offered, since we don't offer a summer school course. And we have some kids, that maybe through Alt Ed are taking online courses. And so we don't wanna limit that to 1 credit. We wanna be able to provide the exemption, when it is being, when the credit is a credit recovery, for those students. Under summer school and independent study, again, this is just, some language changes that we have, again, to provide opportunities for our kids who are doing credit recovery to have that option to transfer in more than 1 credit and graduate on time, with their peers. So those were the big, I guess you could say, changes, that we wanted to propose for that, 6-3-10 policy.
Out of curiosity, why do we limit it to 1 unit of credit, in terms of high school graduation?
So, so there are a couple of reasons I've done in terms of understanding for this, is that it kind of creates a more level playing field in terms of when kids, if they need to take classes for high school graduation, they should take them at the high school. We do have exceptions here and there for kids that have maxed out the course offerings that we have. But kind of the feeling is if we offer Algebra 2, then kids should take Algebra 2 with us for high school, and instead of taking it over the summer somewhere else to get that credit. And that's just kind of the way it's been. If they want to take one credit at Heartland or somewhere else, they can transfer in one credit for that if it's not part of the dual programs that we offer with them.
Sounds almost like when you go to a college, if you transfer, you know, they want the last 60 hours to be from there before you graduate. It's like, you know what I mean? Like if you get a degree from a university, that's really just the reason why that.
Yeah, I was just thinking though that, you know, as I attended the high school prep meeting, we've got kids who have really packed schedules already. There's not a lot of flexibility in terms of adding classes like woodworking, which would be, you know, something that would be enjoyable to do. But if you're really kind of going for those college prep classes, it's really hard to fit all of that in. And since we don't offer, for example, Algebra 2 over the summer, if we had a student that wanted to go and take a couple of classes from an accredited school in order to alleviate or make space in their school year calendar for those other types of classes, or they just struggle with the course load and they're trying to make a more even distribution of how they approach their work. It just seems to me like I obviously wouldn't want somebody to go to Parkland and then get a degree from Mahomet Seymour. That's not what I'm saying, but it seems to me like if someone is willing to do the work at an accredited school, do we want to restrict that to one credit if, you know, if there are some of those reasons I just laid out, and that would help the student be more successful?
Sure, I think in talking with guidance counselors, you'll find that that's gonna create a huge Pandora's box, like opening that up, and so I think there are other things that have to be considered if you wanna expand that beyond one credit. So I would say that. I would say that when there are special situations where kids are struggling with then we kind of look at those on a case by case, and they could come to you for an exemption.
Okay.
Or
Kids at the high end who perhaps just, you know, I just don't wanna do it just for credit recovery, because you do have some kids who might be wanting to get ahead and just build a knowledge base. So, is that where you feel like I just feel like if we say maximum of one credit, if we could say something about making an exception if you work it out with the district, broadens this policy to the point where if you had kids who wanted to do that, they could come and have that one-on-one discussion.
Can't you just add on there whatever you're thinking, like it should,
Yeah,
some
that's
exceptions may be made for credit recovery. You did say on a case by case base, I don't know what you said,
I
not what
think-
you said, or I'm not.
I feel pretty strongly that before we change policy in that direction, that we involve some discussion of our 3 counselors at the high school. Just
That's
only
fine.
just to learn more.
I would,
totally
yeah,
understand.
no, I mean, and I'm fine if we just, but I would like to continue that discussion.
Sure, absolutely, we
Um,
can do that.
You know,
You
like
started
foreign
with-
language, for example. Foreign language is something that a lot of colleges require. We have a really finite way that we approach foreign language, and it really restricts what kids can take in terms of other courses. So if we had a student who wanted to take 0 hour and then over the summer, you know, get ahead in order to free up their schedule, I wouldn't wanna get in the way of that. So I don't think it would be for every course, but I just don't want a policy that's so restrictive, that we haven't, you know, allowed people to take advantage of those other, ways to learn.
Yeah. Well, if you're comfortable with just moving ahead with this, then, we can continue the discussion internally and just get some feedback.
Yeah, can we
on
make a
pros and
note
cons.
to have this one added to our next policy discussion?
Yeah.
And just so we don't lose the thread on this, that would be great.
Well, and you made mention too, which we've had to deal with, so it'd be good to have it right, you know, I'm gonna use the word exceptional, but also for an exceptional student. You know, we've had
Right.
to do that to accommodate an exceptional student in order to get their high school credits in, and based on where I can recall that student is, that's gonna be a continuing process probably for a couple of
Well,
years.
there's such a spectrum of learning
Right.
that, you know, all along the spectrum, kids might have different learning needs, and so I just wanna make sure that we have a policy that's as inclusive as possible without making us all crazy. And so if we can just circle back and get all that data and input, that would be great.
Agreed. Right, those are our, kind of local changes, and we're ready for Mr. Keith.
Can you give me just 1 second, Ken, so I can move my papers around? I don't look at the person that's talking, so.
Good morning, everyone. Are you ready?
Nobody can go out there and that's part about the playground.
That's
Whole
right.
playground yourself,
I
that's
see right
really
there.
awesome.
There's two kids
So-
right there.
There's a whole bunch of kids, yeah.
Ken, just to be clear, just bringing everybody in the room up to speed, including myself, but your proposal for the policies that you're bringing forth today are necessary because of your proposal to change policy 2:240, because they're those cross-reference they impact each other.
Right, so, yeah, let me give a little reminder on the history here.
Thank you.
At the previous policy meeting, I presented a proposal for changing 2:240, and that has to do with policy development. And we discussed that, and we made some changes, and then I brought the proposal with those changes to the next school board meeting, I think it was in June, and we discussed there. And the entire board asked for some additional changes, and that's what I'm presenting today. There's one small change to the proposal for 2:240, and then there's another change that's kind of a significant change in 2:20. That policy defines the powers and duties of the school board. So I was gonna focus on those two changes, because that's the only thing that's really different from our previous policy meeting and the June school board meeting.
But we never voted to adopt the one,
No,
right?
because the board, so it was the first reading in June, and the board wanted these two changes in place, like we had just kind of as general
And
discussion.
we did have everybody at the July meeting, so we waited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So the first change was, the board at large was concerned that there was no reference to, you guys, the policy committee. And I said that, yeah, in our current policy, we have no reference to the policy committee. And I went and checked with what IASB's recommended policy is in the press online subscription that we get through them. And they recommend this little paragraph be added to the section called policy development. And so I think that's perfectly fine. A board policy committee will consider all policy suggestions and provide information and recommendations to the board. So that's IASB's recommendation, and it's pretty straightforward. Any discussion on
Is
that
that
one?
going into 240?
Yes,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's in the policy development section in 2:240.
Got it, thank you.
And then the other change was, we went back and forth for a while discussing whether or not we wanted to leave language in there in 2:240 that says that the board may suspend policy at any time. And we kind of settled on, it would be good for us to be able to set specific exceptions for folks, as cases come up, but that the concern was if we suspend a policy on medication, that it's gonna apply to the entire district because of the way policy works. So, I just drafted this, and of course it's a work in progress, so we can make any changes we want, but this adds an additional power. We've got 19 powers right now, explicitly stated in 2:20. I added a 20th one that just simply says authorizing an exception to any board policy for an individual. Oh, sorry. So this item is, you need to read it based on the leading paragraph. So the leading paragraph says the major powers and duties of the school board include but are not limited to, and then it has those 19 powers. So one of these new powers, or one of the powers would be authorizing an exception to any board policy for an individual, provided the exception is allowed by law. An explanation of the exception, conditions, time frame, etc., as well as the board's rationale for granting the exception shall be included in the meeting minutes. The identity of the individual may be kept private at the discretion of the board. So I tried to think ahead and see what concerns there might be. We want to be able to protect people's privacy, but at the same time, to protect ourselves so that we can't be accused of showing favoritism or whatever, we need to provide some sort of rationale about, this person has an extenuating circumstance and we're meeting that. So.
I think that's important also because really, anytime you set an exception, you're also setting precedent in terms of legal things. So without the explicit understanding of why that exception takes place, it really just sets us up for legal issues down the road. So I think that's a really important piece of this policy, and I think it's a good addition.
Anything that strikes you as concerning about this additional power?
And that's the only change to 2:20 is,
Yes.
is power number 20.
Power number 20.
And then, again, we're just, under policy development, just adding that little sentence about the board policy committee.
Right.
Okay, perfect, thank you, yes. I was telling my kids not to say yeah. Sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I still think these are really, good policy changes to enact. I think it provides the history that we talked about,
Yeah.
and the rationale. And I think anytime you have decisions that are made, understanding the history and the rationale that changes decisions is important. So, thank you for your work on that.
Thanks.
They're still there, I see them.
Thank you.
There's invaders in bright neon yellow shirts, though. I can see who it is.
Right, and then, Megan, you wanted to ask to add the, technology acceptable use agreement this comes from the district student parent handbook.
Right. So I just had a couple of things, as I noticed as I was going through registration. This is also, this year again, I did not feel comfortable signing these, and so I was unable to complete registration. Oh, sure, yeah.
We don't have to
No, I can wait.
but I'm just,
You just walk by just a second.
okay, this is just to let them know.
So, because I wasn't comfortable signing these, my official registration is again kind of hung up this year. Like I don't look like I'm officially registered. I've gone through all of the steps except for accepting this policy and accepting the handbook. And my ultimate goal here is to be able to talk about this policy in a way that I feel like I can then sign it online. The first thing that maybe is just an oversight, but I feel like the online acceptable responsible use agreement, only when you pull that up separately in the registration form, it only brings the first part of the actual policy, because it's only the technology values and the we value what we value.
Okay.
And in the actual policy, it kind of adds responsibilities and restrictions. And so I'm hoping that we can add that piece of that to the individual link for the acceptable responsible use agreement.
So that,
The whole rest of the policy, so starting at responsibilities all the way down, because I think this has some important context.
absolutely.
And if you're not reading the handbook all the way through, and you're assuming as a parent and a student that this is everything that you're agreeing to, it's a little bit different when you then go ahead and accept the handbook. And so I just don't want anyone to say I never saw that piece of it because they didn't go into the handbook and read the rest of it. So I think if we can make sure that the whole policy is in that separate link, that would be helpful. Is that hard to do, Jared? Okay. And then to the part of the policy that I'm having a hard time with, I still feel like we might be able to do a little bit of work on some of the language. I feel like this language is very district-centric, in that, you know, the district says, so as with any district resource, the students are financially responsible for the loss, theft, damage to one device in the Chromebook. And then the next paragraph says, we're not responsible for any loss resulting from use of the district technology and make no guarantees that the technology of the district networks support the student will be available at all times. So I understand our need to say that because poor Jared can't live here 24/7 and things are gonna come up. But it feels very one-sided, like we're giving the students and the parents a device that they don't own and asking them to take 100% of the responsibility for it. So if we could add some language that maybe just says within reason, or the district has a policy to investigate any damage and assess whether or not the damage is a result of the student or parent neglect or is just part of normal wear and tear. We have accidents, but the language in this document doesn't really account for accidents, and it's, you know, it's a legal document, and so I feel like we can do a little bit, and I wanted to bring this up for discussion here, and if what you'd like me to do is bring to the board some suggestions, I don't mind writing that up.
And you're just looking at that last paragraph.
Well, it's kind of within the whole, you know, this is kind of within the responsibilities, and the restrictions also have a little bit of that as well.
This one's from the handbook, the parent handbook?
The parent handbook, so it's really just the full policy, and I think, you know, this should be included in this online as that separate document, and it will more, I mean, it will encompass all of what we're asking with association with the Chromebook. And then I have a really hard time with number 7 under responsibilities. Understand that the district technology, student files, and student activity may be viewed, monitored, or archived by the district at any time. You must make your one-to-one device available for inspection if requested by an administrator or teacher. This seems like a giant invasion of privacy to me. I understand what we're trying to do is, you know, safely make sure that students aren't going to sites that are inappropriate or, you know, self-harm, and the Go Guardian is a step of this, but the ability for the district to monitor and archive at any point in time what's going on these devices just seems like a giant invasion of privacy to me. And I have a really big problem signing away my kids' right to privacy. And so that, I mean, for me, that's the reason that I won't sign this. I think that if we're going to use a tool like a Chromebook, we have to think through the policies. A textbook would not invade someone's privacy in that same way. And so if we gave someone a textbook instead of a Chromebook, the textbook can't monitor or archive them in their room at night. So I feel like we need a little bit more balance here between how do we keep people safe and how do we still protect privacy. A lot of our personal private rights get taken away or given up under the guise of protection and safety, and I just have some real concerns that our kids do have a right to privacy, And this is a tool that we as the district decided to make mandatory and to give them. And I don't want it to be a tool that infringes on their rights. And this policy is problematic for me because of that.
Just some history, just so I'm up to speed on it, because I haven't done the handbook. So, Dr. Hall, correct me, or maybe you just say that there was a committee of parents and staff and administrators that go over the procedures that are put in this book, correct?
Yes.
And we presented it in our May meeting, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so I wanna make, like, because here's where I'm going from again. I don't want people that spent time to look at things and think like, I spent all my time on this and it's not good enough, you know,
Oh,
just
I don't
because.
think that we throw the whole, I think there's very good content in here. I just think that, the idea of privacy is an important one, and I know that these are children, but they still have a right to privacy. And this wasn't a tool that they asked for, that they're bringing in on their own. This is a tool that we gave them.
Yes.
So I feel like we owe it to them to make sure that we do that in a way that doesn't put at risk their right to privacy.
We don't, I mean, our goal never has been, never will be to invade or overstep our boundaries with that. That has to be balanced though with our ability to investigate situations, including cyberbullying and harassment, intimidation. And so I think somewhere there's a middle ground, and I'm happy to.
Well, that's why I wanted to have the discussion, like,
But I can't,
I don't know what
somewhere
that-
has to say though, that it is our device, and I don't know what that language looks like today. I completely respect what you're saying, and you're right, we said we're doing the Chromebooks, and here it is. But I would want our district, and I think just from a liability standpoint, we need to be able to ensure that if, an investigation might be too strong of a word, it might also in some situations be the most appropriate word to look into situations that are endangering either the kid who has the Chromebook or, that student's peers or something like that.
Right, and I have no problem with the goal of it, I just have a problem with the way that we have it stated in the language here. So if we want to change this to say something like, parent and student understands that if there is a reason for investigation, being a teacher or someone at the school, this is already in here, feels like pornographic, obscene, graphically violent, vulgar images, sounds, music, language, or other materials are being accessed on this device, that parent and student will be called in for a district discussion, and investigation is optional. Something that shows that we're in this together. And I think that the idea of monitored and archived, that's just dangerous language. I think we can accomplish, if our goal is to accomplish preventing bullying, protecting kids from a device that has access to things that may not be appropriate for them, I think we can accomplish that goal without language that necessitates their giving up their privacy. So I wanted to use this as a springboard to have more discussion. I don't have the answer to this, but I do think it's important. And then I think that the other things, there are some things like, has this highlighted? So avoid having the device in extreme temperatures. I brought this up at the beginning. So both of my boys are running cross country this year. They have no control over some of the environments that this device has to be brought into.
Cross country meet, it's
Right.
just be nice.
And so when we ask them to say that they're 100% responsible for an environment in which they don't have any real control, I don't think that feels like a partnership either. So I can't say you're responsible for not having this in an extreme temperature, but your only option is to go on the school bus with your cross-country coach, have the Chromebook outside, because that's the process of it, and you're gonna be responsible for that. So if we need to change the language to say, when the device is in your control, you should do these things, but the school has to take responsibility for the times where the student has no control over the environment, or the parent for that matter. I don't have any control over what goes on in the school or the environment in which the Chromebook sits, but I'm being asked to take 100% responsibility, and it just doesn't feel like a partnership. So I feel like if we work on this language a little bit, we can have a policy that is more fair to both parties.
Can you tell me, give me your thoughts on, do you wanna move ahead with this now, or and then have it ready for, implementation next school year? Those kind of changes would need to go, I feel, out of fairness to the process we have, and I'm not opposed to this, I just want to hear kind of your thoughts on timeframe. The Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee is the group that we review the changes in the springtime, and then the changes go to the board. So we can either say, okay, we're aware of this, and we can work on it, and go through the process in the spring. There's no roadblock to doing it sooner, other than the people who did do online registration agreed to the language that we see here. And while I totally get that we have a number of parents, such as yourself, who don't agree to it, which is fine, in the registration process, it could be somewhat confusing to make changes mid-year for all the folks that already did the registration, because they were going through under the handbook that was approved by the board in
May 20th, yeah.
So those would just be some considerations, and we don't have to decide that here, but I'm happy to work through.
I think that's probably, if we're gonna make a decision on that, I don't feel equipped to make that. I think it would be good to talk about this with the whole board and hear the discussion of the other members who might think of something that, we haven't thought of. But I think I would like to solve the problem of parents feeling like they have to click a box that they might not agree with in order to complete registration. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve.
Sure.
There are lots of ways that you can do that. You can make that box not a required field in the database. So there are lots of ways that we can do that. I don't know that those changes are super hard to do. Jared's the expert, but I would like to just make sure that we talk through this, and maybe the board can decide the urgency and how we think it's best to approach it, and then communicate it out. And I think parents are good about listening to this kind of stuff if it comes out in bite-sized chunks. So if we wanted to just say, with respect to our technology policy, we've been working on this and we're keeping you in the loop, or maybe just the communication that we are working on it and we've heard the concerns and we're trying to address it, is enough. It's something that concerns me, but I've had a lot of other people reach out to me too. So, I don't know the actual answer, but I would like to see if we could solve the problem.
Don't disagree with you at all. So can we, so just some things coming to mind right now, we could have a discussion Monday night, the agenda item, just like, hey, we're aware of it, we talked about this at the policy committee. How did the rest of the board feel, and then parents could hopefully also hear like, yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah.
Is that good?
I mean, I would like to
ask
address
the
it
advisory
with the
group or address it with them some, just because it's a great, awesome opportunity for us to have them be engaged and to let them know that the things that they're looking at, we're looking at too. We want to complement each other, we want to work together, and that further shows them that, we respect their opinion.
Well, and I do think that the advisory group is great, but the advisory group is a small group. I think we should also figure out how to expand the funnel, because that's my language. Expand the funnel to any parent that wants to make a comment on this.
I agree.
So maybe part of our process is this is what we'd like to go through. Maybe we don't, maybe we have the parent advisory, but we also include that meeting with other parents who can come, I don't know, or we just have a special meeting that says if you have concerns and you want to be heard on this issue, maybe we make it part of the study session for the board. There's lots of opportunities that we have in order to discuss this. I just wanna make sure, because these are just the concerns that I had or that I heard. I don't know that they encompass all of the concerns. And I don't wanna take the time to redo a policy and then have a major glaring issue that people were concerned about that we missed because we didn't ask. So if we wanna take this as a project to really understand the scope of what people are concerned about and then work on the fix, that's great. And how we do that, I think, is something that the board can figure out and move forward with. And I think there's lots of ways to do it: study sessions, special meetings, surveys, combination of all of those. I like, because I think the more data you have, the better decision you make. And so if we can have a way to use a lot of different mechanisms for getting input, I think that is going to result in a stronger policy that addresses more issues than we might even be aware of.
So yes to an agenda item for Monday.
That'd be great.